You're such a good leader.
Thank you. Thank you. I am. I've grown into that. Mended light. What if you relate to both anxious attachment and avoidant attachment? Mm-hmm. You are divergent.
Or disorganized.
Or disorganized. Disorganized attachment. This attachment style was not part of Dr. John Bowlby's original breakdown. He had secure, he had avoidant, and he had anxious, and that was it. And in the decades since, researchers have seen we're seeing people who kind of straddle the line between avoidant and anxious. What's going on there? And what they find time and time and time again is people who display anxious and avoidant behaviors tend to come from more traumatic or even abusive backgrounds. But it's highly correlated with negative and punitive or punishment-driven parenting. And it's important to recognize, especially when you're dealing in family therapy or in healing, that people who parent that way, generally speaking, are not monsters. Generally speaking, there's something else going on there.
Yeah. So the highest correlation between that type of behavior and the parent's state of being or mind or emotional state is unresolved trauma or unresolved grief.
For the parents.
For the parent.
Yeah.
So when the parent shows up in this way that's often seen as emotionally abusive or incredibly neglectful, it's because they have so much pain and they don't know what to do with that pain. And they might not even be aware of the pain. And so the symptom is the emotional abuse, the emotional neglect. But the root of that is the unresolved trauma and the unresolved grief that gets perpetuated generationally if not addressed. And so as we talk about disorganized, if that's something you relate to, see it through that lens of compassion, right? Yeah. Because it's so easy to be like, but I was the kid. It was the adult's responsibility to provide the emotional environment, a safe, healthy emotional environment. And that is absolutely true. Yeah. That's true. But at the same time, they were once the kid also, often in their own emotion.
This is what they learned. This is what they know.
They came by that behavior, honestly. And quite often through generations, you will see from one generation to another, it get a little bit better, and those behaviors get a little bit better until you get to a generation that says, no, I'm done. This stops with me. Yeah. And to go on a little tangent that I know that you love that I do.
Okay, new topic.
I think the space we're currently living in is such a beautiful space because I feel like for the first time, maybe ever in human history, but really the first time in hundreds of years for sure, it becomes safe to talk about these things. Yeah. It's now part of our dialogue as a culture. And I think that is beautiful. And so I think that it is beautiful that you're here joining in with us in this conversation and that we can have these conversations in safe places with understanding and compassion, but also with honesty. Yeah.
That compassion, it's not about letting people off the hook for what they did that was harmful. It's about seeing harmful behavior for what it is while making room for people to be people and so they can grow into something else. The issue with disorganized attachment is that it's hard to predict, right? The behavior patterns are hard to predict. If you're dealing with someone who's anxious, they're going to engage a lot in people-pleasing and trying to get it right so that people will want them there.
And you give me my worth, and you tell me that I'm validated, and if you're emotionally okay, then I'm emotionally okay.
And if you're dealing with somebody who is avoidant, you're going to have somebody whose affect, their emotions are more muted, and they don't seek to connect as much or on a very minimal level, and they're very, very self-sufficient. With disorganized, it's a little bit like that box of chocolates line from Forrest Gump. Like you never know what you're going to get with this person. Yeah. And so sometimes you may have very intense emotional swings and very intense bids for attention and bids for connection. Yeah. And then you may have anger or just outright detachment, shut down, coldness, not even trying to connect.
The disorganized swings from one side to the other.
Yeah.
To seek safety. Right? Mm-hmm. And then the person on the other side of that disorganized attachment is like, what the hell is going on?
What the hell is going on?
It's a bit like being on fire and running around looking for a puddle to jump in and not finding it. So sometimes they're here and sometimes they're there. And that speaks to why it's called disorganized, is because they're all over the place.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And especially, and it feels
It doesn't
disorganized.
fit into a box.
Yeah. And when you're living it feels disorganized, but it also feels disorganized on observance. You know, you're just, what's going on here?
And so your nervous system itself is the most dysregulated.
Yes.
Right? It just kind of switches between constant fight, flight, fawn, and freeze. It's like it doesn't have one coping mechanism. And because of that continual switching, it causes the most emotional dysregulation and also the most dysregulation in the body. And it's the easiest to internalize of the problem's me. It's all my fault.
Right. So what this looks like as a child or in kids, it's approaching life with a lot of fear and distress. It's dissociation, stuffing emotion. As you were saying, your nervous system gets super dysregulated, so it's hard to be calm and at peace. And again, you see both the anxious and avoidant behaviors. In adults, it looks like a lack of tools and knowledge for managing feelings. So you go back and forth between anxious behaviors, avoidant behaviors. Sometimes you protest, sometimes you make demands, sometimes you pull people close, sometimes you push them away. And this is highly correlated with something called borderline personality disorder. Borderline personality disorder, often in cases of trauma or neglect or emotional abuse, people want closeness, but they're scared of it.
Yeah.
And so their behavior becomes erratic because they're often engaged in people-pleasing behaviors, but then when they get hurt, they shut down, they explode, they push people away. It feels all over the map. And subconsciously, because they want closeness, but they're scared of it, they test the people that they're with to see if they're really going to stick it out. And sometimes they test them so hard that the other people disengages and says, I'm done. And then the person with this organized attachment style says, see, I knew it. I'm fundamentally unlovable.
Yeah, or I knew it, you were always going to leave me.
Yeah.
And I know I did this Carl Jung quote in one of the previous videos, but until we make the subconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate, right? It's like, especially with the disorganized, they go through these testing behaviors of like, oh, I'm going to make sure they're not going to leave me. Oh, I'm going to make sure I'm not abandoned. Let me test it over and over again until you get to the point where the other person is like, this doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
Like this isn't healthy. This isn't safe. I'm done. And then they're like, see, I knew they were going to abandon me.
Yeah. So this looks like mood swings, rage, extreme vulnerability, and back again. It often shows up as hero worship, like putting someone on a pedestal if they're in your life, and then if they let you down, then they are like you're either an angel or a devil. That's how they might see you. And I want to talk about dissociation. Dissociation is detachment.
Right.
Detachment emotionally, psychologically, mentally from your present situation. And dissociation is a trauma response. It's not an avoidance one. Generally speaking, actually not generally speaking, it is not something that you choose to do. If you're choosing to do it, it's not dissociation.
Right.
Because dissociation happens automatically as like a self-protection mechanism. And it's the nervous system.
Yeah.
It's not psychology or choice.
Well, and something I want to point out is this is the way your nervous system was created. You were hardwired to respond to traumas certain ways, right? And we go over this in some of our trauma videos, so we're not going to go too deep into it right now. But I remember when I read The Body Keeps the Score, and you have like 3 levels of responding to a trauma, whether that be physical, emotional, otherwise,
Sure.
right? Like you reach out for help. That is the natural reaction, is to reach out for help. And if you don't get that help, then your second next reaction is to fight, right? Whatever that fighting looks like. And then third, if that still doesn't work, or if you were physically in the position of you couldn't fight back, then you freeze and you shut down, right? And so dissociation is that stage 3.
Correct.
It is a healthy response. Like if you are in a trauma position, whether physically, emotionally, sexually, like if you've gotten to the point where you dissociate, like that is a healthy response. Yeah. And so I don't want you to meet yourself with the judgment or what's wrong with me or why do other people X, Y, Z and I can't. Like that was the way your body was created to respond. And that is okay, and it kept you safe. And if you are currently in a place, because before you do any sort of healing for anything, you have to be safe. And what happens is maybe you are physically safe, but emotionally you don't feel safe, right? Because your nervous system is stuck in those behavior patterns of those loops of looking for safety. And so if you are now in a place of safety where it is supportive to start deconstructing, whether you want to call them a trauma response or a coping mechanism or a behavior pattern, if you are in a safe place to start deconstructing those things that used to keep you safe and now keep you stuck, that is amazing. That's something to celebrate.
Yeah.
And we want to celebrate that with you. We're talking about the turmoil that happens, that creates a disorganized attachment. So you experience all this turmoil and you're left in a state in which your nervous system was activated a lot of the time. You had significantly more difficulty managing intense emotions, which then fueled intense, exaggerated, and often unpredictable behaviors. Your nervous system may have learned to dissociate, a sense of leaving your own body, to survive traumatic experiences, or you may have learned to stuff your emotions so far out of awareness that they practically cease to exist. And so this creates a dynamic where basically with your behavior, you're saying to the other person you're trying to create a close relationship with, which in every way, shape, or form feels unsafe. Like we all have the human need to have close, secure connection or close, unconditional love. But your desire for that is completely at odds with that feels completely unsafe. And so if that behavior could be put into words, it might sound like, I need you, but I know you're going to abandon me, so I'm going to abandon you before you abandon me. But wait, I need you, come back.
Yeah, that's why it's disorganized.
Yeah.
That's what that is, yeah.
And if it can be summed up in one word, it would be unpredictability for both the person who is disorganized and the people who are trying to build a healthy relationship with that person.
So the solution for this, as it is for all of the insecure attachment styles, is to develop secure attachment starting with yourself. And to that end, I mean, Mended Light, that's our whole mission.
Yeah.
We have a program. It's a course in conjunction with therapy called Innate Healing, which is meant to guide people who've experienced trauma from a place of disorganization to secure attachment, from a place of pain to a place of safety. Yeah. And that's what it exists for. So we'd like to invite you, if this is you, to give this a try, to schedule a complimentary 15-minute consultation with a member of our clinical team to learn if this is a fit for you. Yeah. I think it probably will be.
Yeah, well, and it's the same solution for both the anxious and avoidant, right? So anxious,
and disorganized.
Avoidant, and disorganized. It is creating that healthy space within yourself, which I've said before, and I had this aha in my mid-20s, that it was so hard to create a reality that you didn't even know what it looked like. It's so hard to create secure attachments when you're like, what does that look like? Yeah. And that's leaning more into my logical side, which tends to be avoidant. But in reality, it's what does it feel like? Because it's all an emotional state. So what does it feel like to have secure attachment? What does it feel like to have real love? And what does that feel like for myself, within myself, to give it to myself? And then what does it feel like in a friendship, in a partnership, in my relationship with my kids, in a relationship with my parents and my loved ones, right? And we can create that within ourselves, and we can invite our loved ones to go on that journey with us. Yeah. But ultimately, the depth of our relationships is a matter of people meeting each other there. And so what has that felt like for you? What does it feel like for you? Or if you're getting stuck, what do you feel like you're stuck on? Yeah, let us know in the comments below. And we've got this entire series of videos still rolling out. So join us for the next one. We're going to be talking about negative cycles that we get stuck in and how to do something healthier. Until next time, folks, keep shining. We need your light.